Welcome to Common Sense. The Common Sense program is a series of shows that feature interviews with interesting people in our area. We're filming this so that you get to know these folks, what they do, and what's making sense to them and what doesn't. And we'll do this in a clear, concise, and direct way. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing the wise and wonderful Representative Gayle Manning from the 55th District of the House. Welcome, Gayle.
And thank you, Rudy, for inviting me in the kind words.
Okay, well, and thank you. And thank you for your service, to the people of Ohio. I know you're a former senator and currently the representative.
That's correct.
From our area. Now, why don't you get us started? Give us some background, where you were born, where you've lived, how you've come to Lorain County.
Well, I was born in Lorain County. I was born at Elyria Memorial Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And so my family is from here. My mother grew up in Lorain, and my dad grew up in Ridgeville.
Okay.
And they met at the roller rink out in Elyria.
Oh, how nice.
Yes, and so we ended up starting our lives in Ridgeville, my life in Ridgeville. They had a home there. And my dad had a small family business that he had started, luxury heating company.
Okay.
And it was expanding. They were doing it just in the barn. And so they had to move. So we moved to Sheffield, where it is right now.
Okay.
And so I graduated from Brookside High School.
Okay.
And married my high school sweetheart right after Kent State. We both were at Kent State, during May 4th. And, I was in elementary education. And then we got married then. And he went on to law school at Akron. And I went on to get my master's from Akron in reading in education.
Okay.
And always taught. I did my student teaching at North Olmsted Schools and spent my entire 37 years teaching in North Olmsted Schools, mostly 2nd through 5th grade.
Understand. Tell us the secret to raising such successful children.
Well, thank you for that. You're always a little prejudiced with your children. My daughter, Allison, is the elder of the two, and then Nathan, who is right now the state senator. So, I was very fortunate. I had a husband that was very supportive of the children, just as I was, being a teacher and that. And, being a teacher, it was nice because I was home in the summers when they were home, so you didn't have to worry about what they were doing, especially their teenage years. You could kind of, guide them along those lines. But I think a lot of it has to do with being on the same page with each other. There are many times Jeff and I didn't always agree, but we never showed it to them.
I see.
We would always...
Unified front.
Yes. We would always say to them when they were asking or something that a little bit questionable, would say, we'd get back to you. And then we'd go in some other room and fight it out and figure out what we're going to do. And you're right, we'd come out and we'd be unified. And I think that helps tremendously. And, just being there for your kids and convincing them that they can do it, that they need to be kind to others, and all those things that you need to be teaching at home. We always tried to do it by example. And
understand. And
then hopefully, they would continue those ideals. So.
Okay. Well, tell us about the steps in your career that you've gone through. You mentioned that you were a teacher for 38 years. And what happened after that?
So, to me, being a teacher is probably the most difficult job I've ever had, but the most rewarding job.
Okay.
And towards the end of my career as a teacher, Jeff passed away very unexpectedly.
Sorry to hear.
Yes, and he passed away from an aneurysm, and actually Nathan and I just recently passed a bill, Aortic Aneurysm Day, trying to make people realize it can be genetic and you need to be tested if that happens in your family. And so I'd go to work every day, and then I'd come home and sit on the couch, and feel sorry for myself. And I had friends that saw this, and they conned me into running for city council in North Richmond.
I see.
And so I did that for 2 years. It was a 2-year term. So I did it for the 2 years and decided not to run again because they would try to have a lot of meetings at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was still working. And they couldn't seem to understand why I couldn't take time off to attend these meetings. And so I decided not to run again. And then when I retired from teaching, there was many people that suggested I continue along with politics. I had no desire to be in politics at all.
Yeah,
my husband
but they saw the quality of you.
Yeah, my husband was in it. I was always behind the scenes, and that was fine with me. I was always kind of shy, fine with third graders, but not so good with adults. But so they thought that I would be a good fit for the Senate. I came from a small business family. I had run before and understood what I was getting into. And then I was a teacher, and there's not a whole lot of teachers that are down there legislating, and so
you saw a need.
Yeah, and so they asked me to run, and it took me a good couple months before I finally committed to it. Sometimes you just have to have people talk you into it. Every reason I gave was because of fear. I was afraid I didn't know enough. Afraid I didn't know how to do it, it was just overwhelming.
Of confidence,
Yes, a lot, not very much confidence. And they said they'd be there with me, and I had dear friends and family members and supporters and people in Columbus that helped me along the way, and I won. So.
Okay, well, what's what best prepared you think for the positions that you held?
Mm-hmm. I had parents that taught me a big work ethic, to work really, really hard. And no matter what you do, give your all. I think a lot of it is, I think I'm a good listener.
I know that.
Sometimes you find politicians that would rather talk than listen. And I guess because I was a teacher first, and you have to listen a lot there.
Listen to
and you
those
can't
kids.
talk very long or you lose them, especially the little ones. And so I think those are probably something that I found has helped me out, not only in my first profession, but my profession now, is being kind, being thoughtful, thinking things through rather than, diving right into something. So.
Yeah, you don't want to be rash. What qualities should voters be looking for in a candidate?
I think you want to find somebody that you think might be honest, and you want to find somebody that, if you have the opportunity, talk to them and see where they are in issues. Do they align with your issues? But you also want somebody who's a good listener, somebody that's going to listen to your needs and maybe try to find a solution. And somebody that's going to work hard. You don't want somebody that goes down to Columbus and they spend all their time, taking in the sights rather than doing the job that they should be doing.
How many elections have you been through now?
I believe 5. So, the city council one, and then 2 for the Senate. We are term limited, so I ran 2 times, and I've run twice now for the House.
Okay.
And so I can run 2 more times,
I see.
We'll see if that happens or not. But
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we'll wait for that.
We will.
And hope for the best. What was your toughest campaign in those 5? Was it the first one?
Well, a lot of people think it's the one you just went through, but it was the first one.
Okay.
The first as the Senate, because to me it was just so overwhelming. It was 2.5 counties at the time. It's just now 2 counties because Lorain County has grown in population. And so the parts of Seneca County fell off after redistricting the first time around.
Okay.
And so, you know, it's one of those things that you just do what you have to do. So.
Okay. How do you campaign?
I don't like doing the phone calling. They always try to do phone calling. I'm not a fan of phone calling, but I don't mind knocking on doors. And I think people appreciate that if you
Personal touch.
Yes. Yeah, they seem to like that, even if they don't answer the door, and you put something on the door.
You've been there.
Yeah, they know that you've been there, and I think that means a lot to them. And plus, it gets you some exercise.
You bet.
I always lose weight during campaign time.
Well, these days are just beautiful. We've had such great weather.
Yes. Yeah.
What are the primary differences between a senator and a representative? You've done both now.
I have. And a lot of people thought I started in the House, because that's what most people do. They start in the House and then they go to the Senate. But I started in the Senate, and the Senate has 33, and you have a much larger area. Like I said, I had 2.5 counties, and then about a year later, I had 2 counties, which it still is now. So it's 300 and some people that you're representing. So it's, to go from one end of the district to the other end was close to 2 hours, almost as far as going down to Columbus. And so it can be overwhelming to try to meet all those people in that area. But at the same token, when you're down there, it's only 33 people. So you get to know each other pretty well and know where they are.
Okay.
And you can sit down and talk about...
Interact.
Yes. How can we...
Compromise.
Yes. How can we make this bill better?
Okay.
And, how can I get your support? In the House, much smaller area, I represent all of Avon Lake, all of Sheffield, all of Elyria, parts of North Ridgeville, Grafton, Elyria Township, and Carlisle Township. And so it's a much smaller area. The farthest I come is Avon Lake, which is 25 minutes from my home. Smaller group of people, so it's easier to meet with people in that. But when I'm down in Columbus, there's more. 99 people.
Yeah.
And so you really don't get to know each other really well. And
it's
have
tougher
those
to
conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's compromise on something. It's hard to have those conversations. So.
Well, what's your primary responsibilities as a representative? Really basic stuff.
I think that my primary is to reach out to the people in my district. Reach out to the constituents, talk to them, see where their issues are, where they are on different things. Making sure that I read every email that comes through, every phone call that I get. I'm aware of it. And if they want me to call them back, I usually call over the weekend when I'm home and I have a little bit more time.
I know all about that.
and that doesn't bother me at all. But I think that's what's really important is making sure you're available. I think that's the most important part.
Right. And we're going to have your email address on the bottom of the screen while you're talking.
Great.
So that folks can contact you if they want to.
Yes.
Okay. What committees are you on?
So I chair education, K-12. I'm on higher ed, and that's probably because of Lorain County Community College.
Okay.
And then I'm also on commerce and labor. I had been chair of that the last GA, but this time you can't be chair of two different committees. So
Understand.
I am on commerce and labor.
How are representatives assigned to committees? How does that work out?
So at the beginning of the new GA, so when this GA started, we had a new speaker, and it's Speaker Cup. And so what they usually ask you to do is to put down like your first 5 choices of what you would like. And so, you fill that out and you give it to him, and then he basically makes those decisions himself, or he makes them with leadership team.
Understand. What advantages exist for chairs of committees? Do you set the agenda? How does that work?
So there are benefits of being the chair, because if They usually assign a time that they want you to meet. So it's not a whole lot of overlapping between each committee. But, you can change the time. If something's going on, you can sit there and say, we're not having committee on Tuesday, we're going to have it on Wednesday because we managed to find a room and it's more convenient for the chair. Or you can say, I'm just not going to have it this week. You can decide on which bills might be moving a little bit faster, a little bit slower. I usually do it by if a member of the House calls me up or emails the office or whatever and says, hey, can I have a second hearing? I always try to oblige on that. So we do have
kind
people,
of give and take.
Right. So we do have members that reach out, but every chair does that differently. I try to do it as sequential. So if a bill comes in, you try to give it its first hearing, and then you try to get the second hearing in whenever you can. It's trying to find, especially during the pandemic, it was much more difficult to get a room. And so it's a timely thing right now.
Okay, so logistics can be a little bit of a problem.
It is, yeah.
What are the current major issues that the Education Committee is looking at? So
a bill that we just passed, it was a Senate bill, and Senator Wilson and Senator McCauley were carrying it, and it's financial literacy. And financial literacy was being taught in the schools, but it was kind of intertwined with other credits that were going on. So if you had a class in social studies or that, somewhere along the line you would maybe teach 2 or 3 weeks of financial literacy. Legislators felt, legislators felt like that wasn't enough and wanted a half a credit of it, which would be a semester.
All right.
So it went through the Senate. Everybody voted for it in the Senate, came over to the House. And so I talked with the 2 senators quite a bit. And there were still changes to be made because you would talk to rural Ohio and they said it's hard to get teachers if we're teaching a half a credit. So we tried to find as much flexibility as we could, working with all the different organizations that represent that and coming up with a plan. So we finally came up with something. But then another thing that we had heard loud and clear, and I heard it from the Lorain County superintendents, including Bob Scott, is that there's a shortage of substitutes right now.
Oh.
And the reason is probably COVID. There's probably a lot of retired teachers don't feel comfortable coming in.
Understand.
They're becoming a shortage of teachers. And so what we had done over the COVID time was we made it so that you did not have to have a 4-year degree to be a substitute. But that's up to the decision of the school board and the superintendent.
Okay, give them flexibility.
Right, and so we extended that through this year and made that an emergency. And so when we made the changes, it went back to the Senate last week. They approved it, and the governor's going to be signing it. And so the minute he signs it, they can start hiring substitutes that they choose to hire that may not have a 4-year degree. So that's one thing we've been working on. There's another bill that is out there. I don't remember the number of it. We just heard sponsor testimony last week. We're having a committee on Wednesday morning, and we're going to have second hearing. So they'll bring in their proponents of the bill. And basically what that does is, as you know, there's College Credit Plus.
Right.
And then there's AP, and there's a lot of AP classes that have always been around in Avon Lake.
Right.
And but they are weighed the same. And so what this would do is allow the local school board to decide if they should be weighed the same or should you weigh one more than the other. So the sponsors of the bill were giving examples of students that take an AP class might be much more difficult because you have to pass the test and get a 3, 4, or 5 in order for it to count towards college, while College Credit Plus, you take a college class and it doesn't have to. Those are only accepted in state colleges. The other colleges don't have to accept them, while AP, if you have a certain grade or a certain number, it will count. And so those decisions can, if this bill would pass, those decisions would then be made locally rather than by the state. And so we're looking at that. I found that like an interesting one. And then another bill that we're doing is another Senate bill that came over Senator Gavarone from the western side of Northeast Ohio, Erie County and that area. And she had a constituent that was racing, and so she does a lot of track, and she had a head covering because of religious reasons, and wasn't aware of the fact that you had to have, and the coach didn't seem to know this, that you had to have a waiver in order for her to have that on. And so she runs the race, does really well on her time, and is disqualified at the end because of this. And so I believe it passed out of the Senate unanimously, and I think we're having a second hearing on Wednesday on that also, to make sure any type of religious that you have on, as long as it doesn't interfere in
with
some
vision,
way. Right,
okay.
yeah.
Understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now I want to talk about one of your previous successes, Senate Bill 226, which I know we're all grateful for. That's the annual tax holiday for clothing and school supplies. Thank you very much for that.
Maybe did that when I was in the Senate, so. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and that's really important. That saves families a lot of money, especially at a time when you're trying to get your kids back in school.
Sure. Tell us about your House Bill 5, which is the opiate epidemic and becoming licensed chemical dependency counselors.
I appreciate that because I never remember the numbers of my bill. I appreciate you giving me a little bit of information.
Well, you're such a busy person, and these numbers, are meaningless without a little bit of explanation.
Yes, and you did a great job. We worked with Licata Way on that. They came to us. And
wonderful people.
Yes, they were. And Tom Stuber came down and gave testimony, and he can answer every question they throw at him. But basically what they told us is that they were having trouble finding counselors. So they had assistant counselors that could only be here to visit with a patient if a counselor was present. So it made it very cumbersome. Many of them did not want to go back to school because they were in their 50s and getting close to retirement, and so we found, not understanding what they wanted, they came in and told us. We sat down with, we call them IP meetings, interested party meetings. We sat down with all the different organizations that would be interested in that, and then they came up with what would work, and that everybody felt good with. So you met with the colleges, and you met with the mental health board, and the and so they all figured it out, and it's passed, and the governor signed it. So now hopefully they will be able to get more counselors in the need. As we know, there's still an epidemic with opiate crisis.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Tom to sit in your seat there and tell us a little bit about Licata.
He's wonderful at what he does, and he's semi-retired now, but he still helps us out in Columbus. We're working on another bill with him to just it's a cleanup bill, and he's coming down and talking with us all the time about that. So
well, that's great.
He's a busy man.
Yeah. How about House Bill 37, the emergency prescription refills expansion, Kevin's Law? I know you've been involved with that.
So, and that really came out of my office hours that I had. I was in the basement of Avon Lake Library, and people will come in and either meet with you and want to talk about what's going on, or they want to present a problem that they're having.
Okay.
And Mr. and Mrs. Howdyshow came and told me about their son, Kevin, who had passed away because he couldn't get his insulin prescription filled. It had expired. It was over the holidays. And
awkward time.
Right. And so we passed that, the last GA, to make sure that you can get one prescription a year filled with the pharmacist signing on it rather than the physician if the physician isn't available. Now you have to have a relationship with the physician, and you have to be at your pharmacy. But and then the pharmacist didn't have to worry about being sued if something would happen. So any life-saving drug. Well, what we found out, and thanks to the Howdyshows for doing this.
Wonderful people.
Oh, they are, and they have extended this law. They talked to all the other states, and they've gotten this same type of law passed in other states. But so what this law does is we found out we didn't put in there it has to be paid by the insurance if you have insurance. And so they would go to get it filled and they wouldn't honor the insurance, the insurance you have. So we've put in there insurance and we've increased it from once to 3 times a year.
Understand.
Yeah, but thank goodness for the Howdy shows for working on this
Yes,
all
a
the
real
time.
tragedy.
Yeah, it really was.
Tell us about the new state budget and some of the benefits to Avon Lakers.
So we passed the state budget, and it was one of the most, everybody sang the praises of this budget this time around. Almost everybody voted for, which is highly unusual because there's always a lot in a budget, and so you feel very uncomfortable. But some of the things that will benefit Avon Lake and the state of Ohio, in my opinion, one of the biggest things was we passed a 3% income tax credit cut back to the people, and
We appreciate that.
and it was the largest in the state of Ohio ever. And hopefully that will help families so that they can have that money back in their pockets to make the choices rather than having us in the state doing that. So that's one thing. H2 Ohio, we put more money into to making sure that farmers are educated on the nitrates that are going into the ground so we're not polluting our waters. And we think of Avon Lake with the Lake Erie right up here.
Right.
And so we felt that was really important. We finally managed to change the way of funding our schools. And that came around with, at the time, Representative Cupp, who's now Speaker Cupp, and Patterson, John Patterson out of Lake. And so it was a Republican and a Democrat. They worked on the bill for over 3.5 years. They involved all the superintendents and treasurers from all over Ohio, rural, suburban, and urban. And they came up with a plan that was more simplified than what we use right now. So it's more 60% income and, 60% property tax
Okay.
and 40% income. But it also makes sure that we have ed choice and vouchers, and that the money would always go to, for each kid would go to Avon Lake schools. And then if any of those students would decide to go, take an ed choice and go somewhere else, Avon Lake would have to take that money and pay it to them. Well,
Okay.
sometimes Avon Lake doesn't get as much money as others because, it's a very affluent, it's considered an affluent area. And so now what's going to happen is the money will come directly from the state for ed choice.
Okay.
And so I think that will be very beneficial to Avon Lake.
Yeah, I agree. What pathway out of academic distress for the Lorraine School District is included in the budget?
So ever since House Bill 70 passed, and I
Okay.
was in the Senate at the time, and I voted no on it because it made one person a CEO in charge of the schools, took away all the local school board had, the only decision that they could make was putting a levy on the ballot. And so the Distress Commission, which was people from all over the state, would meet quarterly to talk with the CEO.
Right.
So basically this person had all, they could decide on spending money,
Yeah,
everything.
all authority.
Right. And so I was against that right from the get-go. And I think we found out it wasn't working when you looked at Lorraine and Youngstown and East Cleveland. It doesn't seem to have much success. So they have to come up with a plan. It has to be approved by the state school board and the superintendent, the state superintendent. And they have to figure out if it's working. And it's restored the CEO with, again, a superintendent who now has to answer to a local school board. And so hopefully, if their scores improve, they can totally get out of ADC. But right now with the pandemic and testing different,
Very
they couldn't even
complex,
get out. They could
yeah.
not even get out of it. So.
How does the state finance its activities, and how are we doing?
So the way that we always fund is through taxes. the income tax
Right.
and sales tax.
Right.
And so we take that money down there, and then we have to decide on what we're going to do. And we get federal dollars, and also. And so one thing good about the state is we have to balance our budget every 2 years. We have to make sure.
Can't print any money.
No, we cannot print any money. We cannot make a change to the debt, and anything else. So we have to balance our budget. And so we have to look carefully. We have a very large, I think it's $2.7 billion rainy day fund
Okay.
that we didn't have to go into during the pandemic, which, I found,
Great.
yeah. And so it's there if we need it. And that's always something, of course, it's one-time money we have to always remember. But we're doing very well. Everything was a lot better when we looked at the money that was coming in and the money that was going out. We're doing very well. And, the unemployment is way down. I think it was 14% at the beginning of the pandemic. It's down below 5% now. And I think the only problem that we're having when I talk to all the businesses is, as you know, they can't find enough employees. So if you look around, there's always signs everywhere.
Do you have any explanation for that?
So we've
what
talked,
is
right? We've talked to the businesses, and you talk to other people. Some people say that many people that were getting close to retirement decided to retire. People that are having problems with childcare because I don't think all the daycare is opened up as much. Many of those people did not go back to work. A lot of it was the fact that we were paying an unemployment for people. We were doing it at the state. They were doing it at the federal. So they were getting quite a bit of money. So a lot of people said they were staying home because they could make more money by staying home than working. Now we stopped that back in June. And there's not a work requirement that the federal government won't allow a work requirement because you always had to before apply for at least be out looking for jobs, and that wasn't the case. And so that may have been it. They say some people are afraid to go back because of COVID. Yeah, and you don't know their situation at home. Is there somebody that maybe is ill and they don't want to bring it, back to the house? So.
Understand. What outstanding things are planned for your future and Ohio's right now?
Well, I don't know about mine.
You're not
you never know what the future's going to bring. I don't have long-term plans.
Okay, all right.
I always look to the weekend.
I see.
Hoping I can spend time with my grandchildren. But
me too.
But the state, we're always trying to find ways of making sure businesses are successful. The businesses that are leaving other states because of their high taxes or because of their workforce, we want to bring them here. Right. And so we want to make sure that...
It's wonderful here.
It is.
It's just wonderful.
We don't have hurricanes.
That's right. No earthquakes.
Yeah, no earthquakes, very few floods. You look around at the other, no fires. We're very fortunate. So we're hoping with that we can bring more businesses here because obviously that lowers all of our taxes by doing that. So we are hoping that that's one of the long-term things. So trying to find ways of making sure that we have a workforce that's well-trained. And we're so fortunate to have LCC in our background. They have applied bachelor's degrees now, and to get people into manufacturing, and they are the only one in the state that has two now. They've managed to get that, and it was something we passed a couple of years ago to make sure community colleges could do that. And I just talked with them the other day, and they said their first one is totally full. We're trying to find ways of bringing in more so that we can get people trained and into work immediately.
Understand. Do you get discouraged sometimes when things just don't go well?
Oh no, I'm always positive. Of course, I get discouraged, and I've often been told by family members that sometimes I can be quite negative. I think of it
I've
as
never seen that.
I think of it more as being a realist, and so I'm one of these that I often try to think, like, if I'm watching the Browns play, I keep thinking to myself, they're probably going to lose. They're probably going to lose. So when they lose, I'm not so upset.
Yeah, you just take it.
Yes, and if they win, but it's different though. As my role as a legislator, I'm more positive. I see the brighter future for students.
You're making progress.
Yeah, you see things that happen that you've gotten done that has helped people, and so from that aspect, I'm probably more, because you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, things are so negative right now," and what's happening. And I said, this too shall pass. We lived in a time when there were a lot of assassins going on, assassinations,
right,
and a lot of awful protests, and similar to what we saw recently, but even probably worse. I was at Kent State during the May 4th and saw 4 kids shot and killed.
Wow.
So you think to yourself, it's
Pretty
really
horrible.
not that bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
What surprised you about being a representative? Did anything surprise you, or even a senator? Once you got into that, gee whiz, I didn't expect that.
Probably a lot. I mean, it's just it's overwhelming. So when you get in, and you're really not, unless you've talked to somebody that's done it, you're really not prepared. So you get down there, and all of a sudden they let you loose in this beautiful building, and you're thinking it's hard to find a restroom. It's it's hard to find your office, and to have the understanding of what to do. It's just,
and how everything works.
Yes, yeah. I can remember the first time somebody had brought me a bill, and it was Custom Culinary, a company in Avon, and so it was Mayor Smith at the time had said this business is going to leave, and so he said, "Can you fix it?" And we had just passed Common Sense Initiative, so I worked with Mary Taylor, who was in charge of it, and said, "Is there some way we can get this done?" Oh, she says, "Oh yes, this is a great bill. It's this helps the business." And I remember thinking, I don't know how to write a bill. And I remember talking, luckily they gave me an aide that was very experienced. And she said, "You don't write it. Legislative Service Committee do." And they're all attorneys. So they sat down with me and said, "So how do you want this written, Senator Manning?" And it's like, what are my choices? They laid them out for me, and
there you go.
So it's overwhelming, but it works. It works. You have to learn quickly because you only have 4 years, and then you run for re-election again. You pay for your own housing down there. You pay for your own meals down there, and no one tells you those kinds of things. So it's interesting.
What would you tell someone who's aspiring to be a state representative? What would you tell them?
A good place to start is probably somewhere like city council, school board.
Get into it.
Yeah, and have a better idea. And then, or work with somebody that's in that. I've had some people said that they were interested, and they've come down and spent a day with me down there, and so that they could see what's going on. And then
Kinda
they can
shadow
ask me,
you.
yeah. Then they can ask you questions and say, how do you do this, or what's this all about? So you can explain things to them. I think that's would be very beneficial for them to do, but. We always need, good people from different backgrounds, I think is so very important. Used to have a lot of attorneys down there. There's not as many attorneys
I see.
down there. But, it's always like, we used to have, having bankers down there. We have a couple bankers. And
to get
it'd
like
be nice
a
to have
diversity
pharmacists. Yeah. We had a pharmacist, and he left. He was term limited, and he left. Yeah.
So you have a different opinions, different.
Yes, they can explain things to you because, you just know, we know an awful lot, but very little of every little thing that we know. So
Uh-huh.
it's nice to talk to the experts, and that's why I always come back to the district and try to team up with somebody that is an expert, because I trust the people of Lorraine County.
Now, typically the last question I ask an interviewee is, what's making sense to you and what doesn't, to kind of sum up?
So what makes sense to me? I think what makes sense to me is the fact that we live in the best country in the world, and
I'll agree to that.
we are so fortunate to have the freedoms that we do, but we have to make sure we don't give up those freedoms, and we have to realize that we have to fight hard to keep it to be the best.
Maintain it, yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, it's given to us, and we've got to maintain it.
yes, and we have to respect it.
You bet. Well, thank you very much, Representative Manning. Thank you very much for watching. Please give us some comments. Our email addresses are appearing at the bottom of the screen. Please let us know if you'd like to appear on the show, or if you know someone interesting. Send us their contact information. And remember that seatbelts save lives. Thank you.
The preceding program was presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of ALC TV or the City of Avon Lake.